right, Lisa, this is welcome back. Long time no
Thank
see.
you. Good to be back. Thank you, Mark.
One of my always favorite questions, and when you talked about in the other part of the video, your grandmother, I love talking about influencers. They sometimes come in a minute, sometimes they're a lifetime. But my grandfather, who my grandfather, my grandmother, my mom, and came from Kiev when they were younger, and there's
Oh, wow.
stories about that. But he used to take me on when 5 or 6 years old on a walk, like you were with your grandmother or your mom, to the park, and tell me stories about this, that, and the other. And then I said to him at one point, and I'm Jewish, I said, Zeta, how do you know all these people? And he said, I didn't know any of them. I smiled at one day, and he smiled back at me. And then he started talking to me. So I talked to him. And then another one smiled, and so on. And you got a whole community. You talked about community before.
Yeah.
Just being kind for a smile. And I understood it as a 5 or 6 year old would. And then every time after that, I started understanding what he was really doing. And it wasn't like a plan, he was authentically doing it. With that said, can you share with us 2 or 3 people that have been influencers in your life?
Yes, absolutely. There have been so many,
I'm
but
sure.
today I want to talk about two specifically. One is my grandmother, my maternal grandmother, who I mentioned before, and the second is one of my co-authors. And both of these women have imparted like really positive lessons to me. My grandmother, it's all about having a voice, and my co-author, one of the messages is all about setting barriers to create to create the conditions for success in a really complex, fast-paced career. So first about my grandmother, her name was Marjorie Horwitz, and she was that person in my life who always and from a super young age was encouraging me to have a voice and to find my voice and to cultivate that voice. And what I mean by that is that she would even do voice lessons. So when she with me, like how to use your voice, how to modulate your voice, these types of things. And when she was in high school, she was on her speech and debate team in Oklahoma City, and she was on the team that won the national championship her senior year. And this was incredible, very much celebrated in her town. And but the amazing thing was that when all was said and done, her coach, the person who was her probably her greatest mentor at that time in her life, actually didn't encourage her to go on with a professional career. She did go on to 2 years of college, and then World War II started, and she got married and didn't finish. But she often talked to me about how this particular man had not encouraged her, and how difficult that was for her as a person, and how much she wanted to encourage me. And I was lucky enough to grow up in a time when I was widely encouraged by my parents, my grandparents, all four of them, and my teachers, and all kinds of people to pursue any academic interest that I was fascinated by, any career that I was interested in. There were really no barriers to that. But I always was inspired by how and I always noticed how my grandmother was really encouraging me to speak up, to have a voice. Whenever I would do public speaking when I started my career, she would be the first one to call, for me to call and to say, this happened, that happened, or if I was preparing, I would share my remarks with her. And it made a big difference. And for my own path to find my voice, several years ago, before my daughter was born, I started doing jazz singing lessons in San Francisco, and all of
Wow.
this singing was really my first step, like baby steps towards finding my voice and activating that. And then later on in DC, with a friend of mine who was actually a great singer. I'm not a great singer. I'm just a very enthusiastic person who loves to sing. But and so we started a jazz band in Washington D.C., and we would perform and do these great things.
You have to
And
be a pretty good singer for that.
well, I had the confidence of a singer, but I don't think it sounds so great. But anyway, you can be the judge. But it
Okay.
doesn't really matter if you're willing to to put yourself out there. It doesn't matter too much, particularly when my friend, who's a great singer, could sort of, you mostly heard her voice in the concert. And then the book. So writing this book during the COVID year of 2020 was really the first time that I felt really confident about being able to distill clear messages with in my voice, authentic messages about leadership and about developing as a leader, as a mom, as a partner, and putting putting these words down on paper, writing this with our friends, and really publishing a book, and then going through the media tour about that, and speaking on my first podcast, my first radio interview, my first TV interview, all these kinds of things. These were all first, and this all happened last summer. The book was published in June, so that whole kind of end-to-end experience has really given me a lot of confidence about knowing that I do have something unique and to say, and that I'm able to articulate that. And so that's that's a journey that I'm on to this very day.
No, it's brilliant. And, you see the influence that your grandmother had on your mom, and then on you, and now your daughter, and now people. It's not by accident, and it really does happen. So, good for her for being who she was, and good for you for being proud of who you are and remembering her. So,
yeah. And public speaking type things, you can learn them. I still remember the very first time I was speaking at an event for work, when I was like a new analyst, and I had written all my remarks like in very small font on one piece of paper, and I kind of read them like that, in an office room, and in front of the our client and all this. And the partner who was there at the time, I remember he kind of took me aside and he was like, what? It was obviously a disaster. But he was like, what? Don't sweat it. What you need to do is just do this like 10 times. Like, take every opportunity you possibly can to do public speaking, and eventually you will find your voice, you will find your way, and I'm sure you'll be great at it. And don't worry about this little incident.
It's if you're authentic about it and you're telling what you know, then it's easy to do. And Maya Angelou is one of my favorite authors, and her quote always stays with me, which I'm sure most people won't remember what you said, they won't remember what you've done, but they'll always remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
I think that's a big part of it. Like you said, you're not a great singer, but you're an enthusiastic singer. That's how you make them feel. Yeah. And so it's super important. So thank you for sharing those. Those are beautiful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for having me.